I've owned quite a lot of scalers over the past 10 or 15 years. There was the Micomsoft XR-GB2 Plus that I found in an awesomely gigantic electronics centre in the depths of Kowloon, Hong Kong about 10 years or so ago. Man, I was thrilled when I came across that one. The Micomsoft XPC4 that I use for my 24kHz arcade boards. The XR-GB Mini FrameMeister, of course. The OSSC. The GBS control. And probably the most well-rounded device I've used up to this point, the RetroTink 5X. They've pretty much all been great in one way or another, but every one of them has had limitations, and they've always left me with a little itch I'd like to scratch, you know what I mean? So I found myself on the upgrade path for many years now, looking for that device that does everything well. You'll probably notice that the most notable absence in my list of scalers is the RetroTink 4K, and that's simply because I'm not willing to spend that amount of cash on a video game scaler. That's not a criticism of the RetroTink 4K whatsoever, don't get me wrong, it's just a case of different strokes for different folks. I bought a Morph 4K when it came out and have very much enjoyed it for upscaling digital sources. It does a magnificent job with my Switch and my 360, for example, but I've been waiting very, very, very patiently for the analog bridge to come out so that I can plug my old consoles and arcade boards in directly, so I don't have to run it through an OSSC first in an unsightly chain that looks like Lord Vader's catheter or something. So, is this the best video scaler I have ever owned? Does it do everything a retro gamer might want it to do? Let's find out. Chickity check. Before we start, I want to say that my Elgato 4KX capture card can't actually capture 4K 60 in HDR. It can do 4K 60 in SDR, or it can do 1440p in HDR. For the purposes of this video, I decided that the HDR was more important than that extra bit of resolution. HDR is, in the words of Richard Ledbetter, a game changer. So that's what I've gone for here. Please watch this video on an OLED TV or a modern high-end phone with an OLED panel, etc. for the full effect. The Morph 4K also outputs in 1080 or 1440p at 120Hz, which is fantastic for those of us who want to use the included black frame insertion feature and achieve CRT-like levels of motion clarity, but without the huge loss in brightness that you get at 60Hz. Now 120Hz won't do us any good at all on the YouTube for obvious reasons, so I'm using the 4K 60 mode instead. The BFI option with 120Hz on the Morph 4K has to be seen in person, and yes, it looks absolutely amazing, and without the extra dimming and flickering effect you get with 60Hz. It is a great feature. So yeah, this video will give you a decent idea of the kind of quality the scaler is able to output, but it looks significantly better in person, as it were, so please bear that in mind. Alright, let's start off with a little retro game bread and butter. 240p resolution. We're talking NES, Mega Drive, SNES, PS1, well, everything before stuff started going up to 480i/p in the PS2, Dreamcast, Xbox, GameCube era. 240p needs to be good, of course, so let's run through the process of working with this device. We have to go into input, select our input signal, and Bob is your uncle. Uncle Bob. We have an image now on the screen, but of course it needs some dialing in. Now the Morph 4K features a Wi-Fi connection, and you can use this to download new firmware, CRT masks, and tons of other stuff. And you can also find a great big list of profiles for all your favourite consoles. I find that this Ludwig guy has some very nice profiles here. So we're on a Sega Mega Drive/Genesis 320 by 240p game. You can then adapt this profile if you wish. I always do a little bit of that personally. You can add scan lines, of course. You can add some really detailed CRT masks. You can add interpolation to your image at varying degrees of strength. You can fine-tune things a great deal. You can go for a razor-sharp, blocky pixel look, and I do mean razor-sharp. Look at that, even sharper in person, remember? Or you can go for a nice, soft, fuzzy, sort of shadow-masked CRT look, or anywhere in between, really. You can then save this as an auto profile, so that next time you import a 320 by 240p resolution, this profile will be loaded, which is lovely. Now you'll notice that this image is fucking brilliant. The addition of HDR is great. It means you can really pump up the brightness, thus overcoming the darkening effect of those CRT and scanline filters. This is a great thing, in my opinion, as on earlier devices, scanlines in particular really did darken the image to the point where it was, rather lifeless. The image this thing spits out on my Panasonic OLED TV is really quite mesmerizing, to be honest. Hopefully this video is doing a reasonable job of demonstrating that. Let's have a look at a couple more. It's one of the most iconic video games ever released, Sonic the Hedgehog. I think people often forget how incredible this game was upon release. The insane speed of the scrolling, the super cute and super cool character design, the abstract, weird yet super stylish early 90s art design, the irresistible sense of enthusiasm and positivity, the wonderful FM soundtrack. I remember seeing it in motion for the first time on the corner-mounted CRT of my local game shop as a little boy, and I was just blown away by it. I had to have a Mega Drive, and it became a super smash hit, of course. It looks magnificent on the Morph 4K here. Indeed, it's by far the best I've ever seen it look on a fixed pixel display. And for no justifiable reason, not that one is needed, here's Panzer Dragoon Zwei, and it looks quite magnificent. What about a quick test of 50Hz, folks? Here's Destruction Derby, or Derby if you're from the New World, the original PAL release properly optimised for 50Hz. Well, it was developed in a 50Hz region, so yeah, it's kind of how it's supposed to run really, I suppose. Anyway, whatever, the Morph handles it beautifully. This is another one of those games that absolutely knocked everyone sideways when it first released in 1995. The physics, the bits of car flying off, it was all very impressive stuff indeed. Now in the PS1/Saturn era we started getting a lot of 480i titles, and also titles that switch back and forth between 240p and 480i at regular intervals. This transition has often been a bit of a sticking point for digital scalers. Many of them historically have struggled with long gaps while the scaler switches modes and the TV transitions to the new signal. CRT TVs would switch basically instantaneously between these modes, but with digital displays it's a bit more complicated. The XRGB Mini Framemaster famously had a long gap whenever it switched modes, and that was a bit of a pain in the arse. I've got the Morph 4K on triple buffer mode here, which adds a tiny amount of lag, but on the plus side it keeps those transitions to a minimum by employing a frame buffer and, smoothing the whole thing out for the TV. So how are 480i transitions using the Morph 4K? Well, have a look at Virtua Fighter 2 on the Saturn here. There's a 480i title screen, to a 240p FMV intro, back to 480i gameplay. You can see the transition there. Not too bad, eh? This would have taken several seconds on a number of older scalers, depending on your particular TV as well, of course, meaning that you'd often miss bits of gameplay or video or audio or whatnot. So this is a nice boost. I find this transition time perfectly acceptable. Pretty good, in fact. On the topic of 480i, the deinterlacing itself is solid enough to my eye. I'm not technically minded enough to break down the technicalities, but it looks good to my eye. This is the Sega Saturn's rather oddball 704 by 480 interlaced resolution, and the Morph does a solid job. I'll just remind everyone again that it does look significantly better in person. There's still a little bit of a flicker there. You can see the checkerboard there, and the Sega Saturn's output is causing it one or two minor issues, but it looks good as is, and of course the deinterlacing can be improved via software updates in the future, I should imagine. These guys have been very hard at work so far.
Yeah! Fight! 3, ready, go!
Here's another one, Tsukyu Gurentai. I'm not pronouncing that right for the Sega Saturn. It was known as Terra Diver in the West, which is a lot easier to pronounce. There's a 480i bit, there's a 240p bit. And while I'm playing this, just a little reminder that Terra Diver is, in my opinion, the best shooter on Sega Saturn and one of the greatest shooters ever. It's even reasonably priced by Sega Saturn shmup standards, so go and get yourself a copy. If you have a Saru cartridge or whatever, then yeah, what a game. Absolutely mesmerizing. Anyway, I couldn't talk about 480i without looking at the PS2, could I? So, here you go.
You're tuned to 76.5 on your FM dial. This is RIDGE FM, broadcasting live from Ridge City. This is for all you race fans out there. Here are the Boom Boom satellites coming straight at you with some wicked beats. Check it out now.
Here's Ridge Racer 5. Looks good, right? Still a bit of flicker in there, as I was saying earlier. There are quite a few deinterlacing options to play with in the menus, as I said before, and the team are improving the firmware all the time, it seems. Still, it looks pretty damn good to me. And here's a bit of Metal Gear Solid 2. Man, this had some f***ing long cutscenes, didn't it? I grew a f***ing beard watching this intro. Great game, though. Alright, let's move into the space age and look at some 480 progressive scan titles. Woo! Bit of a weird choice, but representing the Dreamcast's VGA output here is the recent port of Wipeout. Just because I was playing it recently, it's really, really good. And it looks awesome in anamorphic widescreen here. I've thrown in some very fine 480p scan lines there, so gives it kind of a CRT PC monitor vibe.
Come on, wake up. Daydreaming again, were you? Just like your mother. Mind always wandering.
Then we have 480p from an original Xbox via component. Here's some Fable. This one hasn't aged all that well, has it? I remember it looking amazing at the time.
Present yet.
Why are you just I've lost Rosie. I left her and I can't remember where. Her stuffing needs changing today and I can't find her. Please help. She's a lovely little...
Stock available!
Panzer Dragoon Ultra, on the other hand, looks incredible, as it always has. Alright, so far so great. Let's get a little bit mean with this device and test some slightly more obscure sources. Bear with me a second. Excuse me. This is a Pentium 3 Voodoo 3 equipped retro PC from the space year 1999. So, plug this into the Morph 4K and what do we get? Boof! Works right out of the box, but it does need a little bit of dialing in. There's a whole host of adjustments available to you, of course, which cater for this fully. So that's a nice desktop. What about the games? Well, this is a very interesting little title called Hard War, developed in the UK by Gremlin. It's a sort of space flight, Mars flight, trading, exploration, combat type thingamabob with an amazing IDM soundtrack courtesy of Warp Records. It rocks. It ain't exactly action-packed, and you will most definitely have to read the enormous manual that comes in a box, but man, the vibe of this game is just pretty incredible. Maybe I'll do a retrospective on it at some point. And I'll also be making permanent profiles for my Windows PC. It looks great, sharp as a tack. Sorry I had to abandon that one a bit earlier than I'd hoped, precisely because of that amazing soundtrack I wanted you all to hear. It got flagged by those robbing bastards, so sorry about that. Anyway, let's bring you another one. This is Unreal, looking unreal on the Morph 4K. This is again in 1024 by 768 resolution. It was picked up immediately and sampled appropriately by the Morph 4K. What about the old school DOS games in 640 by 400 resolution? Yep, here's Doom. Again, it needed a tiny amount of dialing in, but you know that's where the profiles come in handy. This game, as with many other DOS games, runs at 70 Hz, which is unusual by today's standards, of course, and the Morph is set to output 60 Hz, so you will notice a slight skipping effect. I've seen this behaviour on many scalers in the past, and there's not really any way around it, as far as I know, when you're outputting at 60 Hz. Perfectly acceptable in my book, but something to bear in mind, perhaps. I'm not sure how this would work if you put the Morph 4K into VRR mode. I really should have check this out before I did this review. Maybe I could do some further investigations later. Is it possible to run the TV at 70Hz? I don't know. Does anybody have the answer? I have seen a little bit of discussion regarding this on the PixelFX Discord server, so it's perhaps something that can be worked in via firmware. Maybe so. Still, despite all this, it looks crisp as hell and it runs perfectly acceptably. Another win for the Morph 4K in my book. Now let's get completely unreasonable and throw something really tricky at this nascent analog bridge. This is my Sega Model 3 arcade PCB running at a medium res 24 kHz and at 57.5 Hz. It's a real curveball for this device, and I've seen a number of scalers come a cropper with this input over the years. The Morph 4K, however, handles it like a champ. Again, we're in an unusual refresh rate, slightly below 60 Hz, so you will see little micro stutters that really aren't noticeable during gameplay for me. And again, I wish I'd at least tried the VRR mode to see if my TV can just output this at a 57.5 Hz refresh rate. I don't know. I will put an update in the description perhaps. The important thing is that the Morph handles it beautifully and it looks and plays fantastically well, so that's great for those of us with weird spec arcade PCBs. If this works, then most of them really should. So what are my overall thoughts? Honestly, the Morph is pretty fantastic. It's a very well-rounded device indeed, as you can see from all the stuff I've thrown at it here. It is indeed the only scaler I've had that handles all of my sources well, so far at least. That is a wonderful thing. It has no particular weaknesses at all, at least in my testing here. The full 4K and HDR output allows for some incredible CRT and scanline effects, all the while maintaining the kind of brightness and glow that we associate with our beloved CRTs. It's extremely tweakable, the firmware and menu systems are robust and very detailed, the quality of life features like the HDMI CEC so that I can just sit here with my Panasonic TV remote and flick through the menus is a great addition, it really is. And the built-in Wi-Fi likewise allows me to update firmware and download new masks and profiles and all that kind of crazy cool stuff. It really is a breeze. This thing is so powerful and easy to use. I'd also like to say that the PixelFX Discord community has been really good fun over the past year, or whatever it is. We've all been waiting for a very long time for this analog bridge, of course, but I've found everyone on there pretty much to be really cool, and the devs themselves have always been open and available, and everyone's been pretty well-humoured about the situation. We've got there in the end, haven't we? And the analog bridge is great. The Morph 4K offers everything a dedicated gamer could need and more, in my opinion, and it's fairly affordable too. It gets my full-throated retro mule recommendation.